Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Court Jones. Good to see you all here. Thanks for joining my special live stream with Proko today to help launch Proko 2.0. If you don't know me, I have the caricature course on Proko.com. I was Stan's, first guest instructor. I've known Stan for years. He and I used to both teach at the Watts Atelier here in San Diego. And when he started his channel and asked me to participate, I was pretty happy because I really like all what he's been doing there for years with that. So my course has been out actually since 2016, specializing on the art of caricature. And in the course, I start with talking about the fundamentals of caricature. There's the basic exercises to help build skills for anyone who's not experienced at all with caricature, or if you even have just a little bit of experience, it's good to get these sort of traditional atelier style drawing fundamentals applied to caricature, because that's kind of my thing. That's my angle on caricatures. Is I was traditionally trained in a fine art atelier, and I bring those concepts into the world of caricature to give my caricatures more realism, the ability to render them believably, three-dimensional forms, good structure, planning them out properly. And then the second part of my caricature course goes over more advanced concepts. I mean, not that they're advanced so much, but they'll help you. They're beyond the fundamentals. So when you get stuck like on a tough face, or if you have two people to draw together, there's all these exercises you can do to get you in the right frame of mind. Because caricatures, to me, is very trainable. You don't need to have a special gift to do it. It's something you can learn. I learned. I didn't know how to do caricatures when I started in theme parks years ago, but I learned by doing it. And then I developed my own sort of teaching techniques based on the exercises I would do for myself in my own studio when I was presented with, like, say, a tough face or a tough job. I would figure these things out. I would figure out different ways to work, different ways to trick my brain into doing funnier exaggerations and getting better likenesses. And that's mostly what caricatures is. It's frame of mind. It's your mindset. I think the biggest hurdle for a lot of people is, one, not knowing what to exaggerate initially. But that's easy. I can tell you that in one sentence. I'll tell you that in just a minute. Beyond that, it's just being in the right frame of mind, feeling like you can just be bold, be risky, do what the heck you want, make it your own. And caricatures, to me, is not always just about making something funny or making fun of someone or being mean. It's about enhancing what is already there to make it more of what it already is, or to change your subject matter into something that serves your needs. Like the classic example I like to use in the course was like something like the Incredible Hulk. If you want to make a figure like a superhero like the Hulk, you're just exaggerating normal masculine physique to a high degree. And that's a form of caricature. That's just changing from reality into something that's more of what it is to make a point or to get a message across about what you feel about your subject. And normally I do it to make people laugh or chuckle and, to get a good likeness. Likeness is really king in caricature. If I had to choose between likeness and exaggeration, likeness wins every time. If it doesn't have a likeness, it's not a caricature. And any additional exaggeration that you can do to throw in, that's great. But it's not the main point of caricature necessarily. It's part of it. It's an important part. But without a likeness, it's not anything. So today, what I'm going to be doing is taking viewer suggestions from you guys about who to draw. Basically different famous faces, anyone you can think of, anyone, maybe you're drawing someone and you've been having trouble figuring out the likeness. I'll try to do it here. And I'll probably use a lot of my exercises from the course, the techniques from my course, to show you how I use them to solve problems. So helping me today from the Proko office is Christian. I think he's in the stream with us here. Are you there, Christian?
I am here.
Hi. Awesome. So he's going to be reading the chat, and hey, there he is, and looking to help me, keep the stream active and interactive, and feeding you guys questions and comments to me. Anything you want to ask too, like while I'm working. It doesn't have to be just requests for who to draw, but if you have questions about art and caricature in general, I'm happy to answer them.
Absolutely. And I'll be reading the questions from proko.com/528. So go there for me to be able to see the questions.
Yeah, that's right. We're not going to be taking the questions from the YouTube live chat, although you're free to participate in the live chat there. But if you want your question read aloud, go to proko.com/528 and enter it there. I should also say while we're getting ready here that I'll be using Photoshop today with my own set of personal brushes that I use all the time in my work. And they're for sale now for the first time on Proko website. I used to just sell them on my own personal site, courtjones.com, and on Gumroad, but now they're going to be on the Proko site. And to get ready for 2.0, I actually refined the brushes. If you've already bought the brushes, I'll be sending you a link where you can download the updated set so you don't have to buy them again, just so you know, if you bought them in Gumroad or Wix already. But anyone that buys them starting today on Proko, you're going to get my new updated set where I've streamlined it a little bit and I've improved some of the brushes. Like there was a few textures on my brushes where you can see the tiled repeating pattern, and that was always kind of a nuisance. And I figured out how to get rid of that. So we've got totally nice blended patterns and textures, which are actually like the painting brush uses a linen canvas that I actually paint on with oils. It's my favorite canvas to paint on. And I just scanned it in and used it as a texture for one of my, or a few of my brushes. And then there's an upgraded pencil brush that's, I think, better for sketching than my old one. My old one was a little too clean and digital looking. And this new soft sketchy brush is, I think, better for quick thumbnail sketching because it's just, I don't know, it feels more like a soft natural pencil with a little bit more green to it, and you can shade better with it. Anyway, they're on sale today too. Just for today, it's 25% off the normal price. So it's just like instead of $10, it's $7.50, but that'll end at midnight tonight. So I'm sure to get the brushes today, either from my website or Gumroad or from Proko. Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and take you on over to my workspace here. I'm in Photoshop, and you can see my brushes over here to the right. And Christian, do we have any suggestions or on who to draw yet? If not, I have someone ready, but
yeah. Well, we have a couple questions or a couple.
Sure.
So far, I'll give you a list so you can choose from the list. There's Marco Bucci, Mark Rebier, Steve Buscemi, Sylvester Stallone, Robert Downey Jr., The Rock Young.
Who was that last one?
The Rock, but young.
Oh, the young Rock. Okay. So when he's just like Igneo still, he's still like in his molten state.
I think so. Yeah. There seems to be a guy very insistent on Mark Rebier.
I don't know who Mark Rebier is.
he's a musician, but you know, it's if you're free to choose from any of the people.
From that list, it's funny that someone suggested Marco Bucci, and Marco's a buddy of mine. I met him a long time ago. But I think I'll go ahead and I like Sylvester Stallone idea there. Let me go ahead. What I'll do is I'm going to actually Google. In fact, I guess I'll share my Google with you here to show you how I find images. So I go to Google image search, and I generally like to refer to just limit my search results to the largest size possible, and that generally gets you the best quality photos. Also just because they're higher resolution, but usually they're good quality photos like this one here. Real nice shading on him there. Nice light and dark. I'll go ahead and copy that. And I know that watching someone Google images is not always the funnest thing, the most exciting, but it is part of the process of being an artist and looking for caricature reference. That's a pretty good one. The from Rocky. What I don't like to see is stuff like this, like where it's taken from a flash. It's like a red carpet photo because there are no good shadows on the face. It's just all like overexposed, lighter halftones. They don't make for great paintings. So I try to avoid anything taken with a flash. I like more theatrical lighting, strong shadows on the subject. That one's okay, but it doesn't really, to me, that doesn't look like him. It's not, I don't know, because the sunglasses are on, the angle or whatever. I also tend to like 3/4 views are usually better than front views. This one's okay. The shadows are a little soft on that. Here's a picture from Rambo. Young Stallone, he's always good to draw from. Oh, that's a good expression there. Let's see. Yeah, that's 1440 by 960. Hope nothing weird comes up because I don't think I have safe search on either. So
Yeah, just scroll past it really quickly.
yeah. So let's go ahead and actually I'll copy that. Sometimes I saved my hard drive, but here I'm just copy and pasting them into Photoshop. Okay, I'll work from one of these two, I guess. So I got this one here. They're pretty much the same pose, just a slightly different expression. Let me shrink that down a little bit. I often have multiple photos open of a subject from slightly different angles, different lighting, as I'm working, especially in the beginning, just because I switch from one photo to the next, looking for inspiration. If one photo doesn't do it for me, if I do a sketch and it doesn't turn out well, I'll just change it to a new photo. It's rare that I have to use one single photo, but if you're working for a client, you sometimes have to, because they'll just send you one photo of the subject, and that's what you're stuck with. So it's good to be able to work from terrible photos because it will happen in the real world. But when you have a choice and you want to produce good work for your portfolio or for a client, and you have the choice to do multiple photos, definitely look for the best photos you can that really, really show the subject's likeness, from the right age, from the right angle, that really highlight their likeness. So I guess I'm going to draw from the one on the far left here first. Let's just go ahead and do a quick thumbnail sketch. So what really strikes me about his head, his likeness, is just how beefy he is. You know, he's just very robust. Every surface is like convex. It's meaty and bony. He's just, you know, beefy guy. I don't know if there's not a better word for than beefy, but especially, you know, later in life now when he's a little older, he's just got a lot of muscle and fat and all that packed in a tight package. I've rarely ever drawn Stallone. I've maybe done a couple in my life, so I've never really done like a finished painting of him. So it's good that I try this one here. And then for this thumbnail sketch here, this is always the first step in the process where I'm just figuring things out. They may not work out. It's just about experimenting, working with different head shapes to just try to find the level of the exaggeration. Sometimes I get lucky on the first drawing, sometimes not. So I have to do a second one or a third one. And, you know, I might spend an entire day drawing thumbnails of the same subject. And then if that doesn't work, I'll come back the next day. Because some people do give me personally a lot of difficulty, a lot of trouble.
What sort of head shapes do you feel like you struggle with the most?
What's that?
What sort of head shapes do you feel like you struggle with the most?
You know, there's not a particular head shape I would say that I can name that's difficult to draw. But generally people that sort of fit into this classic ideal of beauty in like Hollywood, you know, that have sort of average face, average proportions. There's nothing that sticks out about them because you are looking for things that are distinctive or different from the average. I think I mentioned at the very beginning, I can teach you how to draw caricature in one sentence, the basic concept. And it's this, and I say this in the first video on my Proko course. A caricature is just a drawing where you make the things, this is gonna be a run-on sentence, I guess, but whatever is unique or different from the average about the person you're drawing, you make those things more obvious. That's all caricature is. Like when I'm doing caricatures for likeness, it's because everyone differs from the average quite a bit. Hardly anyone, you know, there's a lot of people that are very average looking, but there's usually something you could find that slightly deviates from the average. And when I say the average, you know, that can be a problematic term because all cultures, all different, you know, ethnicities have different types of, you know, average faces for their community. I'm basically just going off of what's like in the art instruction books that we normally see, like by Andrew Loomis, where it's, you know, the face is divided into equal thirds, the eyes are one eye width apart, the nose, the sides of the nostrils line up with the inside corners of the eyes, that sort of thing. Those are the average proportions. And you have to be real familiar with what the average proportions are in order to exaggerate it. So sometimes you can keep the diagram open, like as your reference material to compare against your subject and see how they differ from it. But the more experienced you get, you just sort of do those comparisons in your head. And you just say, oh, okay, I'm looking at his eyes. And man, his eyelids have much more heavy eyelids than the average. You can see much more of his upper lids. and his eyebrows are much more highly arcing with sort of a point than the average. I think he has a shorter forehead than the average, but he has a wider face than the average. So that's what's going through my mind the entire time, is just how does my subject differ from the average? And I'll just every step along the way, I just try to figure that out, ask myself those questions internally. And I don't have a conversation with myself like that anymore because I've been doing it so long. You might have to do it in the beginning where you like literally ask yourself that. Now my hand just sort of responds to it, and just my brain sort of is doing those things automatically. But if I have a difficult time with the person's likeness, I will have to go back to my fundamentals and ask myself those questions. Or I'll do some more advanced, like some of the exercises from my caricature course, where maybe I have to do a checklist of features. Like I literally write out a list of everything that's different from the average about this person. And that helps me organize my thoughts, helps me plan out the caricature. And the checklist is sort of like it's like a thumbnail sketch, but just in written form. And there's some other exercises too. If it comes up with different subjects we're drawing today, I'll go over them, like the spirit animal, exercise, or what else? Like drawing two faces next to each other can actually help with when one of the faces is a real difficult face, a real average face, and quite a few others. See his lids too. Just everything I do, I'm asking myself the question: how are his eyes different from the average? And his irises and pupils are sort of like this lazy-eyed look. They're half covered up by the upper lids. If I were to draw his irises and pupils right in the center of the eye opening, it wouldn't quite look like that expression, or it wouldn't look like him. So every decision you make has to be thought out in that respect. Like, how can I change this to make it better? How can I change it to make it look more like the person?
Would you like a question from the community?
Sure.
Cool. Give me 1 second. Joe Bogo asks, hi, Court. Do you have any advice on critiquing and giving feedback on caricature? I'm struggling in balancing my own opinion on the subject and the opinion of the person doing the caricature. I'd like to give advice in a way that people can make their own choices more clear and intentional, and not force my style into others. How do I do that?
Yeah, that is the biggest trick about critiquing caricatures or being a caricature teacher or mentor to someone, if they ask for advice, is trying to separate your own opinion about the choices on the likeness versus things that are just objectively that they could do better. Usually, I always like to ask the person I'm talking to what their goals are first. Like, what's your intention? Do you want to be a realistic style caricaturist? Do you want to, be like Kruger? Do you want to be more like Steve Brodner? Do you want to be more like John Cash or Tom Richmond? All these little names of different styles that you see in the caricature world. Usually, people do follow other caricaturists when they're interested in the subject and they're inspired by one or two of them, at least. So I like to figure out where they want to go with it first, and then I can sort of cater my advice to that. So if someone doesn't want to be a realistic caricaturist, if they want to do like just sketchy, style cartoons with ink pen, I'll try to cater my advice more to that and talk about being more free and loose. What I always try to avoid is just saying, hey, you messed up his likeness because the chin needs to be wider. That to me is not good caricature advice. That's just a personal opinion that only applies to myself because that's how I draw. That's how I would solve the problem. And as you know from watching different caricature artists, there's a million different ways to solve a person's likeness. There's never just one right way. There's never one decision that's better than another. It's all how all the pieces fall together. And the fact that, I think the jaw should be wider might work for my drawing, but it may not work for the student's drawing because they haven't made the rest of the same decisions I would have made because they have different life experiences, they have different training, they see it differently. They prioritize different things in the likeness. And that's totally okay. Like on another day, I might draw Sylvester Stallone here totally differently. I might emphasize different things on his head as far as like what gets wider, what gets shorter, what gets narrower, what gets more boxy. So yeah, it's it's a thing where you have to read each person's situation individually, and then cater the advice to what their goals are. And once you know that, you can kind of say, okay, well, if you want to be a realistic caricaturist, I see your structure is really off here. What you could probably do is go back to the drawing board and do a wireframe drawing where you focus more on the structure, flip it upside down, flip it in reverse so you can see what it looks like. A lot more errors in perspective and anatomy come more visible when you flip it, or when you just sleep on it and come back to it the next day with fresh eyes. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of how I approach it. I just look for first what their goals are and try to keep away from specific talk about that one thing you did is wrong. It could be a better likeness if you did that, because that's not necessarily true for that person. So I hope that answers your question. It's kind of a long answer, but it requires a bit of nuance.
Rachel asks, I know this is probably a common question. How do you know what parts of the face to exaggerate when doing caricatures?
That's a great question. I mean, that is the primary question for anyone that's starting out or having difficulty with it. And that was what I always struggled with initially too. But it goes back to that initial concept I talked about just a few minutes ago, which was however your subject differs from the average, those are the things you make more obvious. And it's not just about making something bigger. It can be about making something smaller. Like Sylvester Stallone's eyes, actually, now that I'm seeing this, like drawing a little more finished, personally, I think his eyes themselves can be a lot smaller on his face. Because I think he has such a beefy, wide head. The smaller that I make the eyes and the features, I think it'll make his head look even wider and beefier. So sometimes you don't know it until you see it, like that instance where I initially drew them too big, but I wouldn't have known that until I actually went through the process and drew them. So wherever they differ from the average, those things become more of that thing. So it helps sometimes, I think, to squint at your subject, at the photo reference, to eliminate a lot of the extraneous details. And you can see the big shapes. You can see where the mass of the head is, and think about that person's head in relation to the typical average diagram of a human head. Is the person's jaw wider than that average? Is there an extra space between the philtrum and the nose? Is the space between the bottom lip and the chin larger or shorter than average? Where's the widest point on the head? Where's the narrowest point on the head? Is that different from the average? So it's a series of questions you ask yourself, but it starts first, I think, personally, with the biggest shapes. Like, what takes up the most real estate on the head? Where is it the most beefy, meaty? Where is it the narrowest? Where's the most bony? Where's all the where are the areas of the most contrast that that makes the subject look more dynamic? Look for dynamic shapes, diagonals, asymmetries. Because a lot of people will have a very asymmetrical face. I think Stallone here is a case in point. And actually, I think I did. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell because the angle and the expression is a little different. I can't tell if one eye is higher up than the other. On the photo on the left, it looks like his left eye is higher, but on the photo on the right, it's not that case anymore at all. So any one photo can sort of lie to you and deceive you. That's why it's good to have multiple photos, I think, of your subject. I think this is a decent thumbnail sketch. I don't think I quite nailed the likeness. What I probably want to do is maybe do another iteration of this. And this is a normal part of my process. This is what I'll do a lot, where I got like one. I maybe spent actually too much time on this one, probably because I was talking, but usually I don't put too much time into a thumbnail sketch because if it turns out not so good, I haven't wasted too much time. But I like certain things about it, but I think I want to try a totally different approach now on the head shape, because I see now that I think I want to do his head to me looks wider at the top than it is at the bottom. And that can be sometimes counterintuitive when you talk about like a beefy, muscular guy. Usually the lower part of the head and the neck is wider than the top. And I could still do a thick, beefy neck for him, but I think the head shape might benefit more in caricature from one that's a little bit wider at the top. So let me try that. And I'll just go ahead and just sort of free scribble here. And if there are any more comments or questions, I'll let you feed them.
Cool. Tess KA asks, does your course entail the Watts approach of the Riley abstraction for the figure?
Yes, not for the figure, just for the face. Because I do go into figure drawing in drawing the body in one of the episodes. It's part of the fundamental part of the course, and so is the Riley abstraction, but just for the face. I go over what the history of the Riley method, especially in the premium section. I go a lot more into detail about why I use Riley and the benefits. How it derives from portraiture and how I use it for caricature, and what the abstraction rhythms are actually based on, anatomically speaking. So in the premium course, there's definitely a lot more on the Riley method in there. Yeah, but I don't go over the Riley rhythms for the body. I've never found them particularly useful, honestly. I studied them, but at the Watts Atelier, but yeah, I didn't. I never really applied it. I just kind of, when I do bodies, I just do initially just a gesture drawing, just a free-form gesture sketch, and then I tighten it up. But I sort of idealize, make a mannequinized version of the figure, and then I just start to add the anatomy and the shading on top of that. And it's sort of how we worked at Watts. We didn't really put a lot of emphasis on the Riley rhythms for the figure. It is taught, but most people didn't rely on it, at least not for too long. Once you learn it, you kind of like, okay, I learned it, and I'm just going to go back to my comparative observational method of drawing, at least when it comes to the figure. For the head, I use it quite a bit still, because the head is so precise, especially when it's turning in different directions, different perspectives. The Riley rhythms really help me align the features on the cylinder of the head.
Let me find another question. Sam Squatch says, what advice do you have for someone who is never satisfied with what they're producing to a point to where they can't complete a project?
I mean, it surely wasn't always that way. It's probably a newer development that feels like it's been a long time that you're not satisfied. Personally, I think, and I said this before, that it's good to be unsatisfied with your drawing and go through periods where you're really unsatisfied with it, because that just shows that your eye is good. It's improving. Your ability to see mistakes is improving. When you're really dissatisfied with the shapes or the compositions or the likenesses or whatever it is you're doing, it shows that you have really good critical thinking facilities in your brain, but your hand hasn't caught up with it yet. You just need to practice more, and your hand will catch up. The more diligently you practice, and if you stick with good fundamental concepts in your procedure, don't just abandon everything you've learned because it doesn't seem to be working for you. Just stick with the good fundamentals, and I think you'll have it'll come around, and you'll plateau again, and you'll get to that plateau where you're like feeling pretty good about everything you're doing, and that means your hand is finally caught up. Even if it's just one drawing out of a 20, that feels good. At least you got that reassurance or that confirmation that what you're doing is working. So yeah, that's my advice: is just be patient and keep on drawing, because you're slogging up that hill to the next plateau is what's happening, and you'll get there if you keep working at it.
That's good advice. By the way, we're answering questions from proko.com/528. So if you want to ask Court a question or suggest what he should draw, you should ask it there.
I think I'm using this opportunity for the second sketch to exaggerate a little bit more too. Like things like his eyelids and eyebrows, that I think I can get away with a slightly more dynamic shape or more exaggeration. I'm going to take that opportunity here to do that. Wider nose.
Would you like another question?
Sure.
Cool. Hey, Court. Hope you're doing well. What is the best exercise to find an idea for caricature? I guess, well, what is the best exercise for finding ideas for caricatures?
There's no one right way, and there's no one right way that works every time for everybody. That's why I created the different exercises on my course, because on one day, just doing this, like thumbnail sketching, is enough. It'll get you where you need to go. This is just the pick and shovel, doing the work, just getting down in the dirt here and doing it. But if this doesn't work, if like you do several sketches and you're unhappy with all of them, like after trying this a few times, I might just go to something like a checklist. That's usually my next go-to, where I literally do a written checklist of the facial features, of the head shapes. And you can watch the video on YouTube or on the Proko website just to get an idea of what I do. But I start the list kind of the way I started drawing. I look at the things that I would draw first, like the head shape. What is the head shape? Describe that in a few words. Trapezoid, square, heart shape. Does it look like a Grecian urn? Does it look like a peanut? Wider at the top, narrower at the top. Just those big decisions. And then move down the face, like move down to the eyes. Like, are the eyes close together? Are they far apart? Are they big? Are they small? And I think it's important to do this kind of like a written list without actually drawing it, because you're not putting pressure on yourself to perform while you're making the list. You're just critically analyzing what the caricature will end up looking like. You're creating it in your head, in your mind's eye. And in that way, I think it's helpful, because if you try to do it in the form of a thumbnail sketch like this, and it's not turning out halfway through, you're going to give up. But if you're doing the list, you're not doing anything wrong yet. You haven't made any mistakes yet. All you're doing is just thinking of the idea of the caricature and asking yourself the questions that you would if you were drawing it, but you're not getting that negative feedback from your poor drawing. So it's definitely a good way to get you in the right frame of mind to figure out what to exaggerate. And then there are a few other exercises. Well, maybe I'll do that on my next subject here. After I'm done with Stallone, I'll actually do a caricature checklist and show you how I would proceed with that. I think his mouth could be smaller now that I'm seeing it here. This is the great thing about digital drawing. I don't always love drawing digitally, but it is convenient in the fact that I can quickly change something that's not working. I can move something up or down and go, okay, that works better.
That was actually the next question. What are the differences between traditional drawing and digital mediums with respect to the caricature process? Do they differ anywhere from the thumbnail to final rendering?
Yeah, that's funny that I was addressing just that issue. Yeah, so I like the fact that I can change things on the fly without having to like erase a lot. I can move things around if I like that, because I like the mouth shape. I just didn't like its size. If I was drawing on paper, I'd have to scribble, erase it, draw over it, whatever. And if I drew, with too heavy of a hand, it's going to be difficult to erase. So that's the benefit. But the downside to me, drawing and sketching digitally, is it feels different, and it's not, your hand doesn't catch on the paper the same way it would if you're working on real paper or a sketchbook. So you get a different result. It's just a different feeling. It's like driving different types of cars. It's driving a race car versus driving a pickup truck. Not one's better than the other, but they're good for different reasons on different days for different goals. So yeah, I go back and forth. Just this last week on my own YouTube live stream, I did some traditional drawing on the paper and pencil just because I wanted to. I typically, for my live streams, draw digitally because it's just more convenient, because I can just sit down here and just share my screen. But it's a little more of a hassle to get my second camera out and film my drawing board. But I was glad I did, because I think I got some pretty good results. Because I had that tactile response from the paper where the pencil drags on it, and also there's sort of a mental thing that happens, I think, when you're drawing traditionally versus digitally, or painting traditionally versus digitally. Every act you do when it's a traditional material has more consequences than if you're working digitally. So you think about things, I think, a little bit more. You think more carefully about that stroke you're about to pull when it's traditional. If you have to mix that paint color up on the palette, that takes some effort. And if you put it down on the canvas and it's not right, you have to like go back to the palette again. So you develop a slightly more, I think, patient, deliberative working method when you're working traditionally, whatever the medium is traditional, than if you're working digitally. Because I scribble a lot more when I'm doing digital drawings like this. And sometimes it's to my detriment. Like I might actually spend longer time trying to get a good result working digitally like this because I'm thinking a little bit less about the real world consequences of every stroke. It's just kind of like, it's digital, I can move things around. So the benefit is also its curse when working digitally.
Let's see. There's one guy insisting on Marc Rebier as a subject.
Okay, well, I guess I'll Google him since I've never heard of him. That'll be a good challenge. So yeah, I did a couple Stallones here. This is a good example of thumbnail sketching process, although I spent a little long on each thumbnail. I normally try to spend no more than 5 minutes on those. But yeah, I'll look up this guy. You'll just have to tell me how to spell his name.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
M-A-R-C. And then Rebier is R-E-B-I-L-L-E-T. Wait, R-E-B-I-L-L-E-T.
R-E-B-I-L-L-E-T. Okay. Is this him here?
That is Marc Rebier.
And he's a musician?
He is, yeah.
Cool, okay. Yeah, he's got a cool face. I've never heard of him, but yeah, we'll try him. Size, we'll do large. So I'm just going to look for good examples of his face, which immediately doesn't look easy. He's got a lot of like, crazy facial expressions, weird angles, which is okay, but it often if I don't know the person's face, if I'm not familiar with it, it'll like give me a poor sense of what their likeness actually is. I usually like to see more normal views of a person's face before moving on, before trying to draw them. Now, these are like, not very high res images. Yeah, I'm looking for ones with good, lighting. I may not find one.
Let me see if I can find one and send it to you. In the meantime, you want to go through the caricature checklist you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, sure. I kind of want to do it I need a face to do it with. So,
okay, well,
I'll need to get a good one of this guy first. This one's okay, I guess. It's really nice and big, so I'll copy this one here. And,
there's one on his Instagram that might work.
That's weird. It didn't remember my copy image. Okay, there we go. Yeah, if I can't find anything else, I'll just work from this one here.
Cool. See if I can.
Although I think it'd be good to have at least one like 3/4 or side view to help me with his head shape.
I could send you one of his Instagram photos that might work. I'd email it or.
Yeah, sure. Email it. I'll just grab one of these here, and in the meantime.
Cool.
It's kind of low res. Yeah, I'll just grab. This one here.
Okay, I sent you, I've emailed you too.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I just have to do a little image organizing here. It's just not the most exciting thing to watch, of course.
Part of the job. And this is pretty identical to the way you'd be working in a professional setting, right?
Yeah. I mean, if someone told me to draw this guy, I just have to go through this process of Googling and finding the best image. If the client, they usually have something in mind already, but not always. Okay.
This is just me asking, but what percentage of the actual process is research versus the actual art of it?
Oh, not too much usually. As far as photo research goes, that goes pretty quickly. Then a lot of the time is spent sketching, and that could last just an hour or several hours, depending on how successful I am. So yeah, most of the time I would say is spent on rendering on the painting. 75% of the process, because most of my paintings and drawings are, I try to render them out fairly realistically. Okay, so I do like that one of him with the microphone that you sent, Christian. I think I'll just go ahead and use this one as my main reference, because the one on the front view is okay, but it's not as fun for caricature. I think I kind of like the 3/4 views. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. So what I'll do is a checklist, and to me, I have to write it out. Again, not super exciting, but I'm gonna, I guess I'll type it here. Head. Oh, that's pretty big font. So the head, I would say he, to me, has a head that is, I don't know, it's I'll describe it as bony and thin. Thin, probably a little taller than the average of the head. Let's see, forehead. Why is this all skewed weird? Okay. And there we go. Let's say the forehead is wide and with a high hairline. Let's see, his eyes, to me, look farther apart than the average. Far apart. And they seem to have a downward slant. See, the nose, larger than average. Large square ball on the end of the nose. I say ball, but it's basically, the prominence at the end of the nose. It's more squared off. I'd say thin lips for the mouth. Thin lips. I'd say cheeks. I'm just kind of looking things that strike me that I see from the lighting, especially the one where he's on stage with the microphone, where his features are more highlighted and delineated by the shadows. Bony, angular. Chin, I would say it's longer than the average, so I'll just say long chin, but also kind of a wide chin. It's not super pointy. Jawline is it's a little narrower than the rest of the face, but it's squared off. And the neck is, I guess, long and thin. And I might, on my own time, I might do a slightly larger list than that, but that's what I'm going off of right now. That's going to be my, I'm not sure I can put that where it's going to be, stay visible, right up there, I guess. So yeah, that's what I'm going to go off of. That's basically my written thumbnail sketch. Like, I've done the thumbnail in my head already. And that's what I do for a lot of the times when I don't know exactly what to do just by looking at a person's photo. I'll just go off the list, and the list will be my guiding principle. So I'll just draw this in the remaining space here. So let's do a head that's bony, thin, and taller than the average. And some of the smaller decisions about the cheekbones and jaw and stuff like that, I'm just generalizing right now. I'll make them a little more specific as I go on. I wouldn't say he has overly large ears. I didn't really write that in the list, but I'm just looking at it now. Forehead and hairline, sort of a high hairline, especially in this angle. I don't really see that the top of his hair is just right up there, or the top of his head lines up with his hairline. And my thumbnail sketches, I just try to keep them loose and scribbly. My hand, the more free my hand feels, I think I come up with better, more dynamic exaggerations. You don't want to tense up or tighten up at this stage. So I'm not worried about anatomy or perspective or construction at this phase. This is not what the thumbnail sketch is about. That's for the next stage. Like, that's what I teach in the fundamental part of my caricature course, is just deal with small baby steps, just small problems, take them one at a time. First, exaggeration with the sort of a second priority on the likeness. The next step would be the rough sketch, where I take my most successful thumbnail sketch and then I turn that into a rough sketch. I can either just trace on top of it or draw a new drawing right next to it. But the rough sketch is where I really try to sort out the likeness after getting a decent exaggeration. And if the rough sketch doesn't work for some reason, I might have to go back to the drawing board and do new thumbnail sketches, or try drawing from a new thumbnail sketch. But usually it works out pretty well. And then on top, after I do a rough sketch, then I'll do an abstraction using the Riley method to try to find any structural errors or problems with the anatomy or the perspective. Because the way I draw caricatures is I like to have more, I'd like them to look three-dimensional. I like them to look like to have a convincing reality, like they could exist if they were sculpted or 3D rendered. That's just what I like to see in caricature art, so that's what I like to do. And then after that, I would do the finished rendering, whether it's a final drawing or an inking or a painting. And I usually just trace over the abstraction then. So I'm moving on to the eyes here. They're not very deeply set in the sockets. I didn't really write that down earlier, but they're not like flat to the front plane of the face necessarily. They don't really look like that. So I'm going to bring the brow out a little bit more here. And sort of add some eyebrows that I can't really see because the glasses are in the way. Just sort of average eyebrows. I'm going to lower these eyes and eyebrows because it's breaking the rule of my checklist, where I decided to make it a taller than average, high hairline. So I'm just going to lower this down just a bit so that the forehead looks bigger. So yeah, one of the benefits of working digitally is you can change those things on the fly pretty easily. So nose comes out pretty far off the front plane of the face, I think. Just do the initial triangle shape of the nose. That's how I usually handle it. I'd say he has a pretty upturned ball on the end of his nose. You can see into the nostrils quite a bit. It's not like a hooked nose. So we see a lot of that bottom plane, especially in this view where we're sort of beneath his head, beneath his eye line. Okay, and of course he has the glasses. I didn't feel the need to put them on the checklist. I could have, but I don't think I'm going to forget them. They're I'd say larger than the average eyeglasses. So if I'm exaggerating the eyeglasses in relation to the face and in relation to other eyeglasses that are out there in the world, I'd say that you can definitely go bigger rather than smaller. I'm not one of those artists that just goes crazy with eyeglasses and makes them ridiculously large. I like them to fit within the anatomy of the face. Just like how the ear has to line up with the eyeglasses have to line up with other things on the face. Otherwise, they'll not fit right, and they won't look believable. So they have to, the arms of the glasses have to reach, the tops of the ears in a logical place right over there. And I try to capture the nature of the glasses too. They're actually a little more rounded than this, not quite so squared off. Okay. So in the eyes, they're sort of far apart and downward slants. So actually, I made this eye a little too close to the center. Let's move that over to the left, tilt that. So it's more downward slanting. Because I'm not trying to overthink things too much at this stage. I'm just trying to use my checklist as my critical thinking now. I've already done the thinking. I've already put it down on paper, written it into words, and so I'm just trying to manifest this list into reality now. I'm not trying to rethink it, basically. And hopefully I've made the right decisions. That's the part of the checklist is like, maybe you made bad calls. Maybe I made bad decisions, in which case maybe you can deviate from the list, but at least try to get through at least one drawing before deciding the list is no good. Bony cheekbones, really highlighted by this lighting here. I like nice shadows to draw because they help reveal the forms. Pretty prominent cartilage structure on his nose as well here. Nice plane changes. I'm not going to get too much into that because it's just a thumbnail sketch, but I want to include it because it is part of his likeness. How the geometry of his nose, how those interlocking shapes work. Okay, and he's got sort of the mouth is sort of weird. I want to make sure first that the mouth is in alignment with the other features. So actually I need to draw this other nostril over here on the far side of the nose because that should be visible because the facial plane is sort of at a tilt here. And there's the mouth line should be about right there. Again, not a super, super big priority on a thumbnail sketch, but I don't want the mouth to be totally off, It needs to pretty much try to match what else is on the face. So I gave him thin lips. He's got his mustache, of course. That will really help. And of course, the microphone's blocking a little bit of his face here. And I'm not going to draw it, so I'm just going to try to imagine what his face looks like beyond that. The chin, long and wide. So let's give it a nice, strong, manly, straight chin there. I don't love it, but I don't know. I'll draw the jawline and see where we stand. Yeah, man, I think it's okay for caricature, but I think I want to shorten it just a bit. Just making a judgment call there. It's still long, squared off and all that, but yeah, I didn't think it should be quite so long. You can really see his masseter muscle here. On the ramus of the jawbone has its own distinct shape and shadow. Okay. So yeah, that's my thumbnail sketch here. I could definitely spend more time making it look a little cleaner, refining the likeness a bit more. But yeah, that's just my stab at this guy here.
There are a few other suggestions for celebrities if you'd like.
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and move on. So yeah, that's the caricature checklist technique where I draw from my written list that I set up ahead of time. So yeah, who's well, yeah, have any other suggestions?
Yeah. So the suggestions are Cynthia Ervio, Carl Kopinski, or Tom Holland.
Carl Kopinski with Tom Holland? Like they
No,
want like a duel?
no, they're separate.
Oh, okay.
But it's Cynthia Ervio.
Cynthia Urbio?
ERVIO.
That's yeah, I don't know what she looks like. Let me I'm sorry, could you say the name one more time?
Cynthia Ervio.
And ERIVO?
Yeah.
Is that her?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll draw her. I don't know who she is. I like drawing faces I've never seen before. So because it's always a nice challenge. It's just restricted to large results here first. This is a good photo here. I love this photo. Nice lighting, good angle on the person's face. I might grab another one though, just to be safe. Well, profiles are always good because they really show the person's likeness, I think. From a front view, it's hard to tell what the facial geometry is. But the profile view is just like really informative. Get rid of some of this extra stuff around here.
By the way, to ask a question or suggest a celebrity, go to proko.com/528.
Okay, this one's a pretty good one too. And I'm loving all these photos of her. This one, of course, doesn't have the strong shadows that I like, but I think it shows her likeness, such as it is, me seeing it for the first time, shows her likeness, I think, pretty well. Okay. Okay, so let's just warm up with a quickie thumbnail sketch of her, I guess this 3/4 view, this upper left one here. Now, I'll try really hard to go real fast on this one, like I normally do when I'm working on my own. It's just, I tend to slow down a bit when I'm talking and explaining things. I'd say her eyes are pretty close together and have sort of an upward slant to them, to the lower lids. Really light eyebrows in most of these photos. So I guess, she probably darkens them for certain, like the one on the bottom, she has wearing a lot more makeup, I guess, but it looks like naturally she's maybe, I don't know if she bleaches them or if they're just naturally light. But it's a pretty cool look because I can really see her, the brow structure and the shape of the head because the eyebrows aren't getting in the way.
Would you like a question?
Sure.
Gonzalo Ramos asks, hi, Court. Here's my question. When thinking about making a caricature, do you think about the comedic aspect of it, or does it come out naturally as you develop the drawing?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I don't usually think about the comedic aspect of the caricature when I'm drawing it. I just kind of respond to the likeness is really all I'm doing. It's like how I like to think about it. I'm just reacting to what I see and redrawing it in a way that, to me, I think I'm just trying to enhance the likeness more than anything. Unless I'm doing a caricature of a caricature of a caricature exercise, which is an exercise developed specifically to enhance the likeness and the humor. And it sometimes deviates from the likeness quite a bit if you're not careful. So yeah, that's one instance. It depends on the the needs of the client. Like if they really want something funny, if they're a caricature fan and that's why they're commissioning you, maybe that they want something really exaggerated. But generally in my work, I don't over exaggerate too much. I'm pretty tame when it comes to caricatures for the most part. I think I'm gonna give it a real small chin. It's something that can go smaller on her face. A lot of things can be bigger, but I think her chin could go smaller. But yeah, so I don't normally consciously think too much about the funny. It's just sort of, if it is funny, that's great. If people respond to it, I think it's humorous, that's great. But it's honestly not my intention. I mean, it is my intention, but it's in the background. It's just, I think I know it sort of naturally occurs when you change the shapes of the face so much. It just looks goofy. It looks silly. But it's never really to ridicule the person. Rarely ever is it. I mean, if there's a figure I don't like a political figure, yeah, I'll probably want to ridicule them. But for the most part, celebrities, I have no opinion about whatsoever, like as far as, what I think about them. So it's like, I'm just want to do a cool, fun drawing that's fun to look at and it'll entertain some people. I just want people to like to look at my artwork, regardless of if it's super funny or not. So I guess that's why I like to spend time developing the three-dimensional quality, the anatomy, the perspective, because that's, like I said before, those are the things I like to see in a good caricature. Funny exaggerations are great, and I do like to look at them too, but if it doesn't have good structure or a good likeness, of course, then I'm not really that interested in it. Okay, so I got a thumbnail sketch here, and what I think I'll do is, since I talked about my caricature of a caricature concept, I'll do that here, because this is not overly exaggerated. This is pretty tame. I'll shrink that down, and what I'm basically going to do is look at this first caricature as my reference image. I mean, I have my reference image open, but I could technically close it because I'm basically just doing a caricature of this caricature. The things that made this stick out, like make the things that are different from the average that I enhanced, I want to make those enhancements even more pronounced in this next one. And just please keep in mind, everyone, it's not about editorializing my view of the person or anything like that. It's not a judgment call. This is just all about shapes. It's about having fun with geometry and the anatomy, no matter who the person is. So it's like a personal challenge, basically, to make the things that I did in the first sketch work on, like, just turning the dial up to, like, if this is at a 2 or a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, on this next one here, the second caricature, I want this to be a 5 or a 6 or a 7. And then the third sketch, I want it to be like a 10, where it's like, well, you'll see when I get there, but I sometimes get rid of like all, likeness by my third sketch, but it's kind of like a fun way to do it. So our eyes are going to get closer together, more of an upward slant, maybe more of a eyebrow, like heavier brow area underneath the brow is. Gets a little larger. I like the graceful swoop of the nose here. Maybe that gets a little bit longer, and maybe the nose becomes a little more downward pointing. But I do like doing this exercise because like I said before, I tend to be a kind of a tame caricature artist. I stick to a sort of a safe zone most of the time, because that is, in my experience, what most clients really want. They just want something fast. They want a great likeness. They want something that's easily readable by the viewer. If it's like for a book or a magazine, they don't want to have to like sit there and analyze a puzzle of a likeness. The third caricature of a caricature, though, will tend to be that way. It'll tend to be like a puzzle where you have to sort of decipher it if it's done correctly, I think. But the second caricature, the middle one, is the one I usually like the best, because it feels the most bold to me while still clinging to the likeness. I'm gonna make the cheekbones even more prominent in this one here.
Would you like another question?
Sure.
Helen asks, would you say the ability to caricature plays a role in realism? Maybe understanding the prominent features of a face in caricature helps understand the non-prominent features in realism.
Yeah, like working traditionally or realistically, whatever you might want to call it, being a good caricature artist, I think can help anyone's art, especially if you're doing people. Realistically, portraits or illustrations of realistic people, because it teaches you fundamentally what works about a person's likeness, what's important to keep in, what you can take out, and still maintain a good likeness. Like I think the best portrait artists, like John Singer Sargent, contemporary or past, I think they all did a slight bit of caricature in their portraiture, meaning they just changed their subjects ever so slightly to flatter them, to enhance their masculinity, to make them look taller, to make their neck look more long and graceful, or whatever the subject might have wanted, whatever he picked up on, maybe they requested it. Because you never know. Sometimes portrait clients are very picky. Like I've done portraits, realistic portraits for people, and they'll point out things that they don't want emphasized or how they want to look a certain way, or they'll show you photos of themselves that highlight certain attributes over other photos. So yeah, you're always doing a slight bit of caricaturing when you're doing realistic style artwork, when you're doing portrait style artwork. And I think caricature personally gives you confidence to be able to change the subject to whatever it is you want it to be. Whether you want something to look more masculine, more feminine, scary. If you're doing zombie artwork, that's kind of like you're doing a caricature of a human anatomy. Or in comic book characters, especially, I mentioned that earlier too, where comic book hero physique is basically just normal human physique caricatured. There's very few people really look like they're superheroes in the magazine or in the comic books. Okay, so yeah, I did a caricature of a caricature here. Just again, a thumbnail sketch. If I were doing this on my own, I would spend a little more time refining the likeness. But this is again just the initial statement, just the rough thumbnail concept. So, but now let me do the third one, the third caricature. And this is the one where what I tell myself is I'm trying to get into the right frame of mind for the third one. It kind of goes against a lot of my instincts to do this because I tend to like to play it safe. I'm always worried about losing the likeness. I'm worried about offending people, the subject, or people who like the subject. But it's not meant to offend. It's trying to enhance likeness and to be funny. So what I try to do is just think in abstract terms about what's the core essential property of that person's likeness. What can be left out? What can be put in? How far can I stretch something, and break it? This is the sketch where I want to break the likeness. If it works out, that's great. But really what I want to do is just push boundaries. So I'm going to take what I did on the first one and it's going to look very alien because I'm just going off abstract concepts here. Maybe her head becomes more banana shaped. And the back of her head becomes elongated. It's probably not going to work. I'll just warn you all right now. It's probably not going to look great because I'm honestly not great at doing super, super extreme caricatures. I know people that are, and I look to them for inspiration. I'm trying to channel some of my more bold caricature colleagues. But it's a fun exercise to try to do to challenge yourself. Like, how far can you take it to, just wreck somebody's likeness, but still have it be like them, to still have it look like them, or someone can recognize it at least as the person. So the choices that I made in the second one that I exaggerated, I'm trying to make those choices even more obvious. But I'm just trying to throw away any inhibitions that I might have about drawing a person's face here. Maybe your face gets even more like angular, perhaps, straighter edges. So I'm just drawing off of feeling, off of emotion, off of just my gut instinct. Because if I'm too critical, if I'm too literal about what I think I'm doing, it's gonna ruin it. I'm gonna venture back to safer waters, and I don't want to do that for this exercise. This is just an exercise to get me out of my comfort zone and to experiment. And I never ever really use the third caricature for anything. Like, I don't think it ever really turns out honestly good, but what it does do is it helps me feel more free and safe to exaggerate. So maybe since if I'm dialing this up to a 9 or a 10, then I can see, okay, I've gone up to a 9 or a 10. These are the things that work. These are the things that didn't. Now I'm going to dial it back to like a 6.5 or a 7, but I'm going to use some of what I learned in that sketch to do, a better sketch that's a little more subdued. So yeah, I don't think the head really quite needs to be that far back. So it's still the same concept here, but I don't need to make it look like the alien xenomorph. She has a nose ring too. Maybe elongate the neck even more. So the main things I want here are just a dynamic feeling, energy, expression, braveness, boldness, just trying to just go beyond what I might normally do on any normal day. And if I lose the likeness, that's okay. The point of this exercise is really just to push yourself, to get yourself thinking a little bit less literally about the subject. Because that's a problem, I think, for a lot of caricature artists, is they're thinking too literally about everything, and they stay within such a narrow zone that they never really quite exaggerate, because they don't, they're too afraid of losing likeness. They're too afraid of making an offensive drawing. But to me, there's no such thing as really an offensive caricature. It's just shapes on a piece of paper. It's not a value judgment against that person or how I think about them. It's literally just a reaction to shapes based on my experience with human faces. But anyways, I think it's kind of a fun thing to do. I don't know, just people seem to be pretty entertained by it. Yeah, so I can go on and on about it, but yeah, if you have any other, want to move on, let me know.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Annika asks, when did you start caricaturing, and when did you know it was something that you love?
I dabbled with it in high school a little bit, but I was never trained. I never really was exposed to much beyond Mad magazine growing up. Like in junior high and high school, I read a little bit of Mad. And then I would caricature the teachers in my notebooks. One of my teachers actually in 8th grade liked my caricatures of him, so he had me do a weekly caricature of him on the whiteboard in math class. So I would do a new one with a different theme every week, and he got a kick out of it. And they were terrible, looking back on them. I don't think I have any photos of them, but I'm sure they were bad. In high school, and in my senior year, I think I focused on caricature actually as my emphasis for my portfolio for my advanced placement art class. And I don't know why I chose that. For some reason, I had a bit of an inclination towards it. I just liked it, even though I was really bad at it. And then it was right after college, actually. I got into it professionally. I got a job at a local theme park. And that was over 25 years ago. And I worked in the theme parks about 5 years, and then I went out on my own just to do private event entertainment. And then I got really, I started taking classes at the Watts Atelier, and then started teaching there. And I got, started to get more illustration assignments and studio work because I was able to apply my traditional atelier training to caricature to make my caricatures even better and more fully realized. So yeah, about 25 years. That's the short answer. Cool. Is there anyone else to draw? Any other suggestions?
Oh yeah, there are a whole bunch. There is Carl Kopinski, Tom Holland, Tilda Swinton, John Green, Steve Carell, Rainn Wilson, Geddy Lee of Rush.
Nice.
Do any of those sound interesting to you?
Yeah, lots of them, man. I've been doing some caricatures of people from The Office. I haven't done Rainn Wilson yet as Dwight Schrute, but that might be a good choice just because he's awesome and has a great face. And I don't think I've ever tried caricaturing him yet. So yeah, let's go and do Rainn Wilson, I guess.
Cool. The person who suggested
Google Dwight Schrute rather than Rainn Wilson, because that'll get me more Dwight images.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting face. The person who suggested Rainn Wilson also asks, RMB Art says, I'm seeing a family friend in a few weeks, and he wants a full body caricature of him by me. Do you have any suggestions to help me tackle this project?
The full body aspect of it, or just the caricature in general? I'm wondering if he's asking.
I suspect it's the caricature in general. I guess full body of it as well. I think it's like maybe posing and what to invent, and should he take reference, that sort of thing.
And he said it's someone he knows, someone he's a friend with, or
yeah, he wants a family friend. He wants a full body caricature of him.
Okay. My first advice is don't do it. No, I may say that semi-seriously, sort of semi-joking, but drawing people like friends in your personal life, is one of the hardest things to do, because there's all these expectations and loaded, things in your mind about how it should turn out. And you're going to be extra critical of it yourself, because you know the person and you won't rest until it's like perfect. So it's going to be very frustrating. And on top of it, you may not, since you know them and you're their friends, you may not want to offend them or hurt their feelings. So you're afraid to exaggerate as much as maybe you could. So there's all this stuff that comes, this baggage that comes with drawing people that makes it, that's the hardest thing to do in caricature, is to caricature someone. The closer they are to you, the harder they are to caricature. So if it's your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, mother, father, child, it's the worst. That being said, sometimes you get roped into doing it, and you're just expected to do it. So try to just get in the right mindset and be dispassionate about it. And the thing about caricature, like I said, is mostly about the mindset. You don't want to get in your head too much about what's right and what's wrong based on any expectations of you placed on you by the world. You just have to please yourself. So just keep that in mind, and just be critical, be just brutal, be honest with them, and it'll turn out better. If they don't know what your work looks like, if you don't have a lot of work to show for it, maybe they don't know what to expect. But if you have some caricatures already, that will help set the mood, that'll set the tone, that, oh, you can expect something that's kind of crazy like this because that's what I like to do, So manage expectations, and that might help also put you in the right mindset. Oh, that's a great picture of Dwight there. It's next to him, like Rainn Wilson in real life, but I kind of like that's like my favorite image of him so far.
Let me know when you'd
really
like another question.
Forehead and everything. So I'm just going to single this one out here.
Would you like another question?
Let me get started on this here real quick. Make sure I got the right layers active. Okay, yeah, go into with a question.
Okay, cool. Andre Chris Sargent asks, is it easier or more difficult to capture people with faces that diverge a lot from the typical Loomis-esque proportions? Also, I noticed you're using a form of the Riley abstraction in a Putin sketch. How does that method differ when applying it to more cartoonish roughs?
Okay, could you repeat the first part of the question again?
Is it easier or more difficult to capture people with faces that diverge a lot from the typical Loomis-esque proportions?
Yes, because that's basically what you're doing in caricature, is trying to figure out where they diverge from typical proportions and making those things more obvious. If you got someone who's really different already, that's the ideal. That's awesome. However, it can also be a double-edged sword. It can be sort of a false sense of security where you feel like, oh, this caricature is going to draw itself. This happens to me every now and then. Like when I tried to draw Jay Leno, for instance, the talk show host, he has the massive jaw and chin. I usually have tons of trouble drawing him, like making it look just like him, because I don't know, something in my mind is like, oh, this is going to be easy, because he's got such a distinctive jaw and chin. But yeah, it's and then I always inevitably like sort of screw it up and like have a lot of trouble drawing people like that are really different from the average. So yeah, just watch out for that aspect of it where you feel a little overly confident. You still have to be critical of people who are, diverge from the average. And don't think they're automatically going to be easy. They will be easier, but you can't turn off your brain. And then there was the question about Putin, and the one I did from the caricature course with the abstraction. What was specifically asking about that?
Also, I noticed you're using a form of the Riley abstraction in a Putin sketch. How does that differ when applying it to more cartoonish roughs?
Well, if you're familiar with the Riley abstraction, how it's used in the academies and the atelier schools, like how we used it at Watts, it was basically used to help fix our like portrait drawings, our head drawings, usually after the fact. You could use it for the lay-in of the head, but what the teachers would do sometimes is come around and do a Riley abstraction on top of your rough sketch and show you where it's off. Like, here you go. Here's the mouth and the nose aren't quite lined up. The eyes are a little uneven. If you draw these rhythm lines across the face, you'll see how they don't line up. So it was used as a method to correct drawings in certain instances. But you could also definitely use the Riley rhythms to lay in the initial sketch. With caricature, in that respect, I use it as a correcting method to correct my rough sketch usually. So it's basically just to help me line up the features properly in perspective on a caricatured head. Because even if the head's caricatured, even if the forehead and, I'll just do a really quickie thing here. Like, say you got someone who has a really prominent forehead and you want to make fun of that, and it sits out in front of the rest of the face. The center line is going to be here on the forehead, and then the center line is going to move inward to the face down here. And then the eyes will be right about here. The nose will be about here. But you can adjust these Riley rhythms to this new head shape, no matter what that head shape is. It can be a funky, head that looks like, the eave of a roof, where it's jutting out way in front of everything. But then, when you get down to the lower face, it's going to have this consistency down here as well in this area. You're going to draw rhythm lines for the eyes, for the brow, for the lower part of the eyes, for the nose, for the muzzle. You can still do all the Riley rhythms on whatever head shape it is in caricature. You just have to adjust the Riley rhythms to conform to the new caricatured head shape. And that's what I was trying to do with the Putin. I was using that to help correct things, to make the perspective look good, like it looks like the eyes are sitting in the right places, just on this big misshapen caricature head.
Where can people find you on social media?
Well, I think the links are down in the description. But yeah, I'm on Instagram at Court Jones Artist. I have a YouTube channel, just Court Jones on YouTube, if you Google that. And my own website is just Court Jones. But yeah, I'm pretty much only on Instagram and YouTube. And I'm on Facebook too, but that's just Court Jones Studio on Facebook, I think. And that's where I do make my announcements about like my live streams. I usually do that on Facebook. But if you subscribe to me on YouTube, you'll get announcements for my live streams. I try to do my own live streams like once every 2 weeks.
By the way, I am answering the questions, or asking Court the questions, from proko.com/528. Calp also asks, how do I work on improving my line quality / line work?
There's, when you say line quality, that can mean a few different things. But if you're doing like just ink drawings or marker drawings, which is probably the most likely suspect, like in caricature, when I do live quick sketch caricature, like it's all line quality. So I do like a lot of thick to thin lines when I'm doing the face, and that's more of a performance-based type of a drawing, where the lines have to look good, clean, and flashy as you're going. And I've got a couple brushes here that sort of simulate that look. So if I'm doing the face here, I'll go from thin to thick. You just practice these strokes, just practice controlling them. Try doing thick to thin. Try conforming to a certain shape, like doing the ear here, do thin to thick, and maybe that's a little thick overall. But yeah, you want to be able to just pull these strokes, like they just need to become second nature. So sometimes you just need to do a page of just geometric shapes or just lines where you just constantly vary the pressure on your pen, and that's you just have to get the feel of it. And every pen is a little different. Every brush tool is a little bit different. So once you get a brush that you like, and whatever brush set you're using digitally, just stick with that for a while. But if you're doing traditional ink or marker drawings, it's important to get a good tool, that you stick with. Like I like the chart pack ad markers when I'm doing live quick sketch. I don't do too much of that traditional marker drawings live anymore, but the chart pack ad markers with the conical tip are really, really pretty good. Get good line quality with that. And any brush pen really, like Copics or Faber-Castell, Pitt pens, Pigma, Sakura pens, I think. Brush pens are pretty good. But yeah, find one and stick with it, and then just work with it a lot, because you really need to. It needs to become an extension of your hand and of your mind, and that's how you get good at line quality. Basically, is familiarity with a particular tool, sticking with it, using it a lot, and just warming up with a sheet. Let's just like pull strokes like over and over again, and tell yourself this stroke's gonna be thin to thick. This stroke is gonna be, I'm gonna make a circle and fill the entire circle with lines that go from thin to thick. And that's just, exercises you give yourself based on whatever your own personal weaknesses you feel are, like whatever you don't have control over. Try to do exercises that address those problems. But yeah, it's just your hand, it's your mind, it's just the work you got to do on your own.
Tim Adams asks, I am pretty comfortable with drawing, but I'm having a hard time switching to painting. Do you think painting requires a different mindset than painting? Wait, do you think drawing requires a different mindset than painting?
Yeah, a little bit, because there are definitely different priorities in drawing versus painting, but they're linked. I mean, they're so intertwined. Like painting, you're going to have a lot of trouble as a painter if you don't have good fundamental drawing skills, because everything you do in painting is based on what you learn in drawing. Because it's all about, in drawing, it's, you're doing shape design, value control, edge control, and that's a good, clean, cheap medium you can basically practice those concepts with. You don't want to necessarily practice those fundamental skills with paints, because it can be kind of frustrating because you go through a lot of materials and it's very expensive. But yeah, charcoal pencils usually are a great way to tonally practice. And that's kind of what we did at the ateliers at the Watts, was we would draw tonally, which prepared us for painting. So you're thinking a lot about values all the time when you're drawing, and the relative values of like just everything that's going on, the shape design, the just the abstract quality, the line quality of the pencil strokes, the edges, which edges become lost and soft, which ones stay hard. And it's based on rules of lighting, realistic lighting, like how cast shadows versus form shadows work. But once you develop all those fundamental skills in drawing, you're gonna have a lot better time in painting, because you have the same problems. The only new problems introduced by painting really is color, and to a certain extent, color temperature. You can break down the color issues a little bit. And also the fact that it's a wet medium, it works differently, it behaves differently than pencils, of course. But that's just getting used to the tools. That's not a big problem. But yeah, most people's drawing problems with painting can be traced back to drawing problems, and they are drawing problems because they usually have to do with values and shapes. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that right shrewd. It's okay. It's a good rough sketch or thumbnail sketch. Again, it's a thumbnail that I spent a little too much time on. I could probably do, again, a caricature of a caricature here and refine this a little bit more. Unless like people really want me to move on and do another subject.
Let's see what people say. Should Court move on? It'll take a second with the delay. So
yeah. I think I'll do real quick while I'm waiting is actually I'll try to do a simple, like what I sometimes call the Zen caricature, where it's, I mean, Zen might not be the right term for it. That's what we called it at the theme parks. But we tried to do a caricature sort of in as few lines as possible, just to get the essence of a person's likeness. And sometimes you just leave things out. It's very minimalistic. It's hard to do, though, because you want to try to define everything in a face. But really, all you need is a few key shapes, and it can be a decent caricature. So for him, it's like the glasses and the placement of the glasses, and the fact that he has sort of a really short nose. Maybe I don't even need to do the nose, just do the nostrils there. And the fact that he has usually furrowed brow, little angry eyes. Maybe you don't even need, I might not even need to do the eyes. And this is not something I normally do. It's I just thought of it while I was sitting here. I'm like, what can I do really quick?
I think it's pretty mixed whether you move on or not. So it's up to you.
Yeah, I'll just do this because I was just, that's the idea that I had. And yeah, there we go. Dwight Schrute. I don't know. Maybe just add the tie. You don't have to necessarily connect things. I think of someone like Al Hirschfeld who did, sort of minimalistic caricatures, if you want to call them that. So, I mean, this isn't really well designed. It's very scratchy and sketchy, but, it could, yeah. So minimal information. You could still hopefully tell it's Dwight Schrute. I used what I learned from doing the first sketch there and just tried to pare this down to the most simple elements just to get his likeness. And once I see the likeness, you can stop. You don't have to add anything else. You don't need to add eyes if you got the eyebrows and if like the glasses are in the right place. So that's another aspect of caricature that's kind of fun, is doing the, something like that. Anyway, yes, let's go ahead and move on.
Cool. People are suggesting Carl Sagan, Florentino Perez, Carl Kopinski, Tom Holland, Tilda Swinton, John Green, Steve Carell.
I keep on hearing the Carl Kopinski a couple times. Let's look what he looks like. Oh, he's a YouTuber. Is he an artist, I guess?
Yeah, he's an artist. He's an illustrator.
Okay.
He's done things on the Proko channel. And,
yeah, he has a cool face, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Kind of a small image here, but I really like this one, even though it's kind of small. Since he's a YouTuber, he probably doesn't, he's not a big celebrity, he probably doesn't have tons of high-res images out there of him, maybe on his social media, but I think this one will do. Let me zoom in on that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, that's enough for me to see. I don't need to, it doesn't always need to be super high res, especially with just quick sketches like this. Okay. And I'll get a new layer here. And I'm going to let's go ahead and use another sketch technique. I've been doing just line drawings this entire time. I haven't really, done any kind of paintings. I often like to do sketch paintings, or paint sketches, where I define the forms with paint rather than with just line. And I do that as my thumbnail sketch because I can often get a better, quicker likeness, right out of the gate when doing this because I don't know. I think something in me, I think a little bit more like a painter when I'm drawing. I think about the forms rather than things in terms of lines and outlines. And it's kind of easy to carve and smooth, move shapes around when you're working this way. So I can just, see how quickly I can modify the shape of the head here. I can see the head developing, and if I don't like it, I can change something about it like instantly. Let's go a little bigger here, give myself a little more room. So I just think about the head shape first. That's my main priority. And it usually is when I'm doing line drawings too, but it's especially important when you're doing this paint sketching method.
Hey, Court, I'm going to step away for a second.
Okay.
Be right back.
And my next concern is just sculpting the lights and the darks. I think I've got my color picker on the other side there. I'll just put in a couple. Got to get in a dark. I'll put some in the hair there. There we go. Now I can just sample from that to get my full value range. In case you're wondering, I'm just using one of my brushes called the Natural Velvet Round brush. It's kind of a good general paint brush, has some texture to it, feels kind of organic. So I don't get involved in the features right away when doing this type of method. I just try to block in the big shapes and just generally, gradually sort of get to them. I just sort of start, I like to say, using the term ghosting them in, just using really light strokes to just find their placement and find their size. And that way I can sort of see it evolving. And if it's not working, I can just change it on the fly. I'd say he has a pretty short nose. I think it's a large nose, but it's definitely short on his face. And it's very, very upturned, at least in this view. You can see the bottom plane of the nose really well. And it has a really large mouth and muzzle area in general. Like his philtrum looks pretty large.
I'm back.
Hey. Oh, man, you missed it. The craziest shit happened when you were gone.
Oh, man. Is there a dragon?
Yeah. Came in, flew around.
Crazy. Did you name him?
There was no time. I had to just keep on painting.
Sounds like your priorities are you have good priorities. Let me see.
So I try not to resort to drawing. It's sort of tempting to go with really small brushes and start doing small shapes, but I just try to remember I'm doing painting here. I'm sketching, but I'm sketching with shapes, not with lines. So just use the biggest brushes you possibly can for this type of sketching exercise. And this is one of the lessons I showed in my the part 2 of my caricature course was sketching with paint, with digital paint specifically. It's probably not too practical to sketch with, real paints like oils and acrylics. You could, I'm sure you could. But yeah, it get pretty expensive pretty fast if you go through a lot of materials. So I'd recommend digital paint sketching just because it's so easy to change on the fly.
Do you ever do your professional jobs like this?
Yeah, a lot of times. I'll just do a grayscale image And I kind of treat it just like a thumbnail / rough sketch, where I'll get to a certain point of development where it looks pretty good, but then I'll stop and I'll do a trace over of it. Basically, I'll just trace over the lines, maybe with an abstraction to like start to make my corrections. So I just treat it from that point on as if it was a line drawing. I just didn't happen to get there by drawing it with lines. I drew it with shapes. But it is subject to a lot of the same issues, like maybe even more subject to problems with alignment and perspective, because it's such like a free, loosey-goosey way of working that it's more likely that the anatomy and alignments are going to be a little funky, a little asymmetrical. You know, some drawing errors will probably creep in a little more easily here because I am thinking more like a painter, not so much like a draftsman. But yeah, so then after this, I'll do an abstraction or a trace over of it to try to fix things. If the likeness turns out well, if the everything looks good about it, then yeah, I'll move on to the next stage. If though, if I get really lucky, sometimes this, a rough paint sketch like this, I could turn it into a finished painting if it's good enough. Like maybe I'll just flip it in reverse to look for any sort of big glaring, asymmetries or unbalanced shapes, and I can fix it that way and then continue painting. And then I'll just start tinting some of the colors using like the brush in color mode rather than in normal mode. But I don't do the whole painting like that. Like I never like to do just a full grayscale painting and then just tint it as if I'm just tinting an old black and white photo, because it never looks right. It never looks quite as good as if you paint it properly. So what I'll do is I'll just, I'll get it to a pretty rough stage of completion and then tint the colors. But then I'll switch over to a regular paintbrush after not too much time, and then just continue on as if it's just a regular old painting where I'm actually painting with different color temperatures and opaque paint.
By the way, I am reading the questions from proko.com/528. If you'd like to ask Court a question. Has anyone ever gotten angry at you for the caricature you've done for them?
Yeah, that's a real common question I get. No, not really. I mean, maybe they were and they didn't really tell me. I think disappointment is usually the main negative reaction. Like they didn't think that they looked like that, or they're disappointed that I drew them, maybe older or heavier than they were. And then I'm just talking about drawing in person live at events right now. As far as the celebrity stuff goes, I mean, I have a couple stories. I don't know if I can really share them. One particular talk show host, I won't name names, hated what I did of him. I found out through some secondary sources. I'll just leave that up to your imaginations who that is. But that's their right. They don't have to like it. You're not really drawing for the person. I'm drawing for a client. I'm drawing for whoever commissions me to do it, or it's just for my own personal fun. But generally everyone knows the deal. They know that it's they know what it's for, that it's a caricature and it's going to be a little goofy. It's not going to be maybe them in their best light. But, I generally get fairly good reactions because, like I mentioned earlier, I am kind of a tame caricature artist. I don't go out of my way to overly exaggerate most of the time. Okay, so this one's pretty much, this is like what I might do for the rough sketch or the thumbnail sketch using this paint sketch method. Because I think I see a pretty decent likeness here. I mean, I don't really know Karl Kopinski. I mean, I've heard his name now that you mentioned it. I wasn't sure who he was until I saw that he was an artist. I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard that name being brought up before. But just judging off this one photo, I think this sort of captures him. I mean, I could be wrong because I don't have a lot of experience looking at his face, but yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with this here. So yeah, I might just sharpen up some edges at this point, make things a little more crisp, commit to some decisions a little bit more, just a little bit more firm in some of the choices of the shapes. The eyes aren't really quite figured out yet. They're just sort of little blobs. Okay, I think I can probably take on one more, and then we'll probably call it a day. So what are some other suggestions that came in earlier or new ones that I might not have heard?
Let's see. Tom Holland, Tilda Swinton, John Green, Steve Carell, Carl Sagan, Geddy Lee of Rush, and Florentino Perez.
What was the last one?
Florentino Perez. I believe he. Let me look him up. President of the Real Madrid Baloncesto.
Oh, okay. Well, you know who I think I will draw because I think I'll see it as a good personal challenge is Tom Holland, because I looked at him, over the past couple of years as Spider-Man, thinking I need to do a caricature of him and he looks pretty difficult. So he's one of those faces that don't immediately grab me as like being a likely caricature subject, but I'd be interested to see what I could do with him. There's a good picture of him right here.
Nice.
Ooh, that's big. And I'll maybe get one more, see if I can find like a 3/4 view to help me get a better sense of his likeness. That's pretty good. Oh, I should restrict it to large images and probably get better results. Don't know if that one doesn't even look like him.
No, it does not.
Right there. Like, I'm hard pressed to believe that's even him. I mean, I guess it is, but yeah, if any photo you see of a person doesn't look like what you normally think of them as looking like, don't draw from it because it'll just make you upset. Let's see. That's a pretty good one there. Yeah, that kind of shows a good quality of his face. It's not quite as 3/4 as I usually like, but I think it's just enough. Let me bring that into Photoshop. But most importantly, it looks like what I think he looks like. It just reminds me of him. Lighten it up just a bit. Okay, I'll probably fall flat on my face doing this, but let's try it anyway.
I admire it. I admire the ambition.
Yeah, should end the one with end the stream with a really easy subject, but no, not today. Okay, so what I see about his head that to me stands out, I'm just sort of verbalizing my thoughts here. A short head. It's very short compared to its width, so short and wide. He's not, overweight or chubby or anything. He's still like very bony and angular, but yeah, his overall just bone structure is short and wide head. And that's a nice change. That's actually something we've not really done today, I think, with head shapes. Well, so far it's starting off looking like the Bad Robot from J.J. Abrams' company. That's another thing actually that it reminds me of the lesson on the spirit animal, where basically your subject reminds you of an animal, an object, and maybe another person, maybe an inanimate object, and then you use that as the inspiration for the design of the caricature. Now, I don't think that technique can be used on just anyone. I think they have to already be sort of a really distinctive look, or you have to see them as a very distinctive look. Like maybe there's someone you're really, really familiar with, you've seen for years, and maybe their face just always reminds you of a bucket. So draw the bucket. If their face reminds you of a stapler, draw the stapler. If they remind you of a toucan, draw the toucan as the initial shapes. Now, none of these people I've drawn today really remind me of anything. It's just I just said it because my sketch sort of looked like the square-headed robot. But that is another valid technique to finding extreme exaggeration choices, is drawing them like an object or an animal first, and then sort of making their face fit into those proportions. And that's one of the lessons on the Proko, on my Proko course. So check that out. I just didn't think it was appropriate to do on anyone I've seen today yet so far. Usually it's someone I have to sort of think about who I'm going to do that to. It's not just something on the fly, like, oh yeah, that person looks like an emu. You know, it's just, it's really something that kind of inspires you when you see a certain picture of them, or you see them for long enough in the media that it just sort of like just comes to you in a flash, more of an inspiration sort of thing. So he has a really unusual, funky eyebrow here. Like, you might have had a scar in the past, but it's like one eyebrow's like peaked, or maybe he had some stitches or something. I don't really know. So that's definitely an asymmetry, something about his face that is worth noting. I think he has sort of a longer philtrum, the space between his nose and mouth, then kind of a small mouth. Very, very thin lips, almost no lips to speak of. But very, very distinct pillars of the mouth. That's what that structure is called beneath the lower lips on either side. It's got really noticeable plane change there. Like he's got a mouth full of food or something, but he doesn't. It's just the way his face is shaped. I'm going to try to stick within the bounds of that initial head shape I created, but try to make it, you know, conform to his head shape, you know, to his exact features of his like cheekbones, his jaw, because his jaw is pretty narrow compared to his cheeks. But generally, I still want to keep that head short and wide. Pretty big ears, stick out a little bit. And I can take any more questions. If you have questions or comments, let me know.
Yeah. Andre Chris Surgeon asks, I feel like I see a lot of caricature artists doing a lot of classic sorts of faces, well-known celebrities, politicians, talk show hosts. Do you ever feel tired of drawing people that everyone has already drawn?
You know, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I do. I think I do unconsciously avoid people that have been drawn a lot, just because I don't want to, yeah, be just another person in the crowd drawing, like, you know, the Rolling Stones. Nobody can draw the Rolling Stones anymore because Kruger did it to death. You know, no one even needs to try. I mean, I joke about it a little bit, but there's some truth to it. But so I think about that a little bit, but you know, I mainly am just concerned with the people that intrigue me and if I've drawn them yet or not. I mean, I'm not that tapped into the world and the zeitgeist, and I don't know really what everyone else is doing so much. I follow some other artists and caricature artists. I see what they're doing, but you know, I know that's just a small fraction of what's going on out there in the world. And no matter how many people have drawn a certain subject and how many times they've been drawn, my take will probably be pretty unique. I mean, it might look a lot like someone else's because there's only so many ways you can draw a person. Maybe 100, maybe 200, maybe 1,000. And there's 1,000 people drawing Mick Jagger. You know, chances are there's going to be some repeat. But again, I don't concern myself with it too much, other than the aforementioned like Rolling Stones and Kruger, just because he's done them so much. No, yeah, I just kind of draw anyone who intrigues me, anyone whose face, you know, I want to pay homage to them because I like them. I like them as an actor or as a public figure, or I despise them. You know, I might want to do something just because they're in the news a lot and they really deserve a good roasting. But yeah, I don't always draw people with the intention of roasting them. It's just because I just want to draw their caricature because I want to, I like their work and I want to just do a little homage to them. And that's kind of how I look at caricatures. I do see it as sort of an honor or an homage in many cases, because I'm going to spend, you know, 10 hours of my life, 20 hours maybe, painting someone. You know, I want it to be something I kind of care about, unless it's a job, in which case I'm just happy to get paid that someone's paying me to do my art.
Would you be up to critique some work after we're done with your demo?
Up to doing what?
Somebody's asking for critique in the comments.
Oh, critique. Yeah, I mean, anyone that posts on the forums or on the videos on the Proko website for my course, I try to get to them. I don't always see the notifications right away, depending on when I check in. But yeah, post your work, especially if you have a work that's related to one of the assignments. Like if you're doing the spirit animal exercise or the caricature of a caricature of a caricature exercise, post beneath that video in the comments. And that's what people are doing basically now to get critiques and feedback, because we're kind of moving away from Facebook for the critiquing, because there's a lot of people in there and not all of them are really doing assignments. They're just kind of posting their work for their own like glory and, you know, vanity, or they're trying to get followers, and they're not really doing assignments. They're just posting their own portfolio work. So we're trying to encourage people on the Proko website to just post work that's actually from the assignment, so we can give a more proper critique about how well they accomplished that assignment. And if it's posted under one of my videos, I'll get the notification. It's just I have to sort through. I'm also getting lots of notifications for people that are following me, and that's like 99% of the notifications are so-and-so is following you, so-and-so is following you. And then I have to scroll down, you know, in the notifications to get to where it's an actual, like a post on one of the videos. So, but I'll try to look through them as much as I can and give critiques. Yeah, so far, it's pretty far from Tom Holland. It's far from home. Far from a home run. I don't know. Yeah, he does have a tricky face, as I suspected. But I did want to try it just to see what I could accomplish. And it's definitely just a rough, you know, thumbnail concept. It's not, you know, I would draw him a few more times, I think, before I can really even get close to his likeness. But you can see some of my thought process anyway, which I think is what's important, is seeing like how I work through some of these issues, because I have the same issues like everybody has when doing caricature. And maybe I'm not making the right exaggeration choices, or I'm not observant enough to see really what makes them stand out from the average. You know, I have different problems than a lot of you. Like, you know, I have more concerns about, you know, the shape design and the flow and the quality of the edges. You know, maybe some of you aren't really concerned about that yet. You're still working on the fundamentals. But every now and then, I also have trouble with some just fundamental issues with the likeness. And you know, I rarely get something on the first try, honestly. So anyway, I think it's good to see that, to share that, just because it's, you know, it shows that you don't have to be, you know, hitting home runs every single time you sit down and sketch. That's really not how caricatures work in my experience. Unless you're someone like, I don't know, Kruger or Jan Optebeek or something. Yeah, this is not a successful sketch, but it's a good attempt, you know, and I learned a lot by doing it. I might try a different head shape if I were to do it again. And maybe, you know, just to try to redeem myself, I think I will try to do one more before we go here of Mr. Tom Holland. But I'm gonna work from the other view here, the 3/4 view. See his eyes as being pretty small on his head, kind of close together. Just scribbling. It's sort of how I like to work through my thumbnail sketches, is just letting my pencil or pen just sort of dance and just keep on moving it. Hopefully it finds the right shape.
By the way, if you would like to ask Court a question, I am reading them from proko.com/528. Who is Kruger? One that you keep mentioning.
Oh, Sebastian Kruger. He's considered by many to be the greatest caricaturist of our time. And I would not argue with that. He does mostly more realistic pop portraits now. He doesn't do exaggerated caricatures quite so much. But he just spells his name Kruger. He has a few books out that he published in the 90s where he drew, painted celebrities. They're just so well painted and drawn. He works in acrylics, but they're fantastically. Some are just amazingly realistic, but just incredible design choices. Great likenesses, great exaggerations, great lighting and quality of the paintings. So, yeah, he's just an idol to many in the caricature world who came of age in the 90s and early 2000s.
Is he one of your art parents?
Yep. He's an art parent to most caricature artists, I would say. But, it's one of those things where you kind of you have to move out of the house, not stay with your art parent too long, because it's really tricky to try to be someone like Kruger. There were a lot of people that, myself included, say, oh man, I want to paint just like Kruger. But after a while, you just kind of learn you have to stand on your own 2 feet. You can learn from what you can from someone like him and try to, take from him what works, but you gotta make it your own, and make sure you have some other art parents so that you're not just focused on being a Kruger clone, because it was a style that was just so popular for a while, like sort of hyper realistic, super exaggerated, well painted caricatures. So I think I'm a blend of him, as far as an influence, and in some other traditional artists like Sargent or Drew Struzan or Norman Rockwell. I mean, I don't paint as well nearly as any of those guys, but they are who I sort of look to as my inspiration. Classic illustrators, the late 19th century portrait artists, they're sort of my heroes. I just love what they did. I love what the inkers did, like James Montgomery Flagg and Joseph Clement Cole and Heinrich Klei. And, I don't, you may not necessarily see that in all my work, but I do sometimes sit down and do an inking, and I try to channel people like Joseph Clement Cole, or Frank Rosetta or something. And those people are always in the back of your mind. Your art parents, the advice you get, or the lessons you learn from studying them. And you have to decide, where are you going to settle? Where are you going to find yourself, as a combination of these 2 people or these 4 artists, or, eventually you just kind of come out baked out of the oven after having been influenced by all these people. And you don't even have to try. I mean, you don't really have to try to get a style. Your mind and your eye will just sort of work in a way that is reflective of what you like to see in artwork. Like with Kruger, he did great 3-dimensional quality paintings of faces that where the anatomy was really believable. So you hear me talking about that a lot in my own style. Well, I got that from Kruger. Before Kruger, I didn't know you could do that with caricature. My only experience with caricature at that point was some of the stuff I saw in magazines, like by Mort Drucker, Al Hirschfeld to a certain extent. I didn't know you could do them so amazingly realistically. So that was like a new thing to strive for. But then, I started to admire other traditional artists, other artists in other genres, and then, they influenced me in different ways. Okay, this is just even worse than the first one. I'm just gonna, let me just get rid of that there. Whenever I have trouble like this, I'll probably go back to my favorite tried and true technique of paint sketching, where I just paint with the shapes like I did with the Karl Kopinski one. Where did that one go? Yeah, that one. Because that usually seems to work out best for me, because I am more of a painter than a draftsman, I think. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It just is what it is. I tend to work better when I'm designing shapes from paint rather than with line. So that's one thing I've learned about myself. And the same thing with everybody. You got to figure out what sketch techniques, what strategies work best for you. That's why I like to try to introduce all of them in my caricature course. Like all the methods I use to solve problems, I put in the course. Maybe one of them will stick with you. Maybe they'll be, they'll become part of the fabric of your being. And I be really appreciative if it did. I'd be really happy if it helped somebody figure out their best working techniques. Anyway, yeah, so that's about it for today, I guess. Was there anything else like we really should address or any pressing questions, Christian?
No. I mean, your caricature course is 25% off today for anyone that is interested in it.
Yeah, just for today till the end of the day, it's 25% off, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and the brushes that I'm selling on the Proko website, 25% off as well. Yeah, and what else? I guess that's kind of it for now. I want to thank everybody for joining in and all your great questions and comments. I really appreciate you guys watching and participating. You help make the stream better with your comments and your questions, and push me to do things I'm not so comfortable with, like drawing new faces that have people I wasn't familiar with already. It's good to get out of my comfort zone from time to time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming, Court. It's been great having you.
Yeah, definitely. So be well, everybody. Take care. Be healthy. Be safe. And thanks.